My name is Jonathan Belle. I'm an artist, photographer, cosplayer, and I take a lot of my pictures myself. I do a lot of self-portraits. Today, I want to talk about some tips and tricks for taking your own self-portraits. I understand in times like these, it's kind of hard to collaborate and work with other photographers, so having a little bit of a know-how to take photos yourself always comes in handy. Now, I love taking levitation photos. I love it. Here are some of the tips that I suggest over the 6 or 7 plus years of taking levitation self-portraits. First thing I would recommend is getting or finding a milk crate for height. These crates right here, they are a great surface to jump off of if you want to make yourself look taller in photos. To me, this is a lot more sturdy than a bar stool. It is a lot more sturdy than a chair. They're small, compact, usually free when you find them outside of supermarkets, and you could stack them on top of each other. It's a great sturdy base and something that I highly recommend if you wanted to make yourself appear higher in photos. Another thing I would highly recommend is position of your camera. Sometimes when we take photos of ourselves, we hold our phone or our camera like this, but it's great to have different angles. Now, when you take photos eye level height while you're jumping, you're not going to look that high off the ground. So my suggestion, and something that I always do, is lower the camera as close to the ground as possible. This will give a better illusion of you being higher up in the air. So if you are taking self-portraits, or even if you are finding a photographer to work with, make sure before they start taking photos to lower the camera as close to the ground as they can. It'll make you look like you're jumping a lot higher than you are. Trust me. Another thing I would like to recommend when you jump is to jump with your knees and not with your shoulders. When you jump with your shoulders, you're exerting force like this when you're jumping. When you jump with your knees, you're jumping from the bottom half of your body. Now, why is this so important? It's important because when you want to look like you're floating or levitating, your upper body needs to remain calm so it doesn't look like you're exerting force. Now, if you're doing like a takeoff shot, then yeah, that's great to jump with your shoulders because it means that you're exerting yourself up. But if you want to look like you're floating in midair, I would suggest jumping with your knees. It takes a lot of the tension off your shoulders, and then it looks like you're floating. I understand a lot of people don't have DSLRs. I use a DSLR to take photos of myself. Sometimes that's not always the case, and you might have to use your cell phone. So here's a tip that I really love when I have to not use my DSLR and use my phone is always use the front facing camera if you can, or the back facing camera, whichever way that is, but the camera on this side of the phone. And here's one thing that I like to do if I want to take a bunch of photos. I will put the video quality to the highest possible. So if you could go up to 4K on your phone or 1080p, 30 frames, 60 frames a second, I would set it to the highest resolution you can and start recording video. And then walk into the frame of your video that's being recorded, pose for like 2 or 3 seconds so you know you got it. And then when you're done with the photo, you can screenshot your video and you should have a really good quality photo of your pose that you do. So that is another way that I like to take photos myself when I don't have my DSLR set up. Another thing I want to talk to you about is posture. So a lot of superheroes, their posture is not slumped. So one of the things that I do is if I were standing still, kind of like this, you see how my shoulders are a little bit pointed forward. And what I like to do is just roll my shoulders back and keep them back like this. So that way it looks more strong, more superhero-ish. And it's kind of just like you'd be flexing your back. So what I like to do is, like, if I'm just relaxed, shoulders are kind of forward, shoulders are down, and I just take my shoulders, roll them back, and keep them like this so that I have like a upper posture more. And that's how I like to pose myself when I take photos. For those of you that do have DSLRs, this is another little thing that I like to have. It's a interval timer. You could buy these on websites, online. Pretty much what this says, you hook this up to your camera and you could program and record the time, how much time it takes between taking a photo. So let's say that you have this beautiful landscape somewhere and you want to go stand in it. However, you don't have enough time before you, maybe your camera has like a built-in 10 seconds and you don't have enough time to get over there. So what this does, it allows me to say, hey, every 1 minute, take 1 photo, or every 30 seconds, take 6 photos. And it'll just keep going and going until you run out of your space on your memory card. So this is a really handy tool to take photos of yourself when you want to be able to get from a point A to point B, or just set up more time to take a shot, because it'll continuously keep going. You can put yourself in that frame and you'll get the photo that you want after a couple of minutes or so. Some things that I've learned over the years is to always practice my angles as much as I can. Selfies is one thing, and using our phones are one thing. However, when it comes to staring at a big camera, it could be a little bit intimidating. So one of the things that I really recommend is just practicing. Like, practice in the mirror, your facial expressions, practice which side of your face that you think looks the best while you're taking photos. I know it kind of sounds a little bit vain. We're also used to taking selfies of ourselves. I understand that. However, these different angles, the different cameras and the different lenses, they make our faces look different. So whichever lens that you have with your DSLR, I would just suggest practice taking some photos, practicing positioning your camera so you know. Maybe like with your tripod, mark the areas of your tripod for the height and where you stand, so that you know when you have your camera pointed to you, you could tell that it's going to make yourself look as best as you want, because you'll know the position you need to stand in. That's something that's taken me years to figure out. However, that's from me doing it all the time for the past couple of years. So I would just like to say, start now and practice so you know the best angles of your face to capture. Some photography tips that I would suggest, if you don't already know these terms, to look up. Color theory in art and photography is really important. And colors set the tones for different moods, different vibes, and they're really important in photography, especially with a lot of the superheroes that we do. They're very colorful. So choosing the colors that in your suit or your costume, and then going out either against a backdrop or into the world to take photos. Being aware of what colors are where is something that I always try to keep in mind in the back of my head. For instance, like yellow is one of the most colors that are visible to our eyes and catch our eyes right away. So if you have a cosplay that's very yellow, you might not want to stand next to something else around or outside that is yellow, because your eyes want to be drawn to you first, not everything else in a picture. So it's things like that that I would recommend. If you don't know about color theory, I would highly, highly recommend learning about different colors and what they mean and how they make us feel. And then you could incorporate that into the different cosplays you like. For example, like the Green Lantern. Red is rage. And we all know how when you see pictures of red and Green Lanterns, how they make it kind of angry and rage. So just like that example, all the different colors have ways that make us feel. So highly recommend checking that out. Another thing I would like to recommend, even before shooting or taking photos, and this goes with how I do a lot of my creative ideas, is I would suggest looking through Pinterest, getting a Pinterest account, putting together a mood board of all the different types of photos or poses that you want to look at and practice. I honestly think mood boards in photography is extremely important to have. I have several of them myself. Whenever I want some motivation, or if I'm trying to think of new poses for me to try out, new facial expressions, it's always a good way to go and get inspired. And I try to look at my mood boards a couple of times a week, probably once every day if I have the time, to just scroll through Pinterest and find stuff that you like. That way, it helps put ideas in your head to where when you're ready to take your own photos, you're not trying to think like, okay, now what type of ideas am I going to do? What am I going to do now? You'll already have ideas in your mind, or you just might set up your camera to shoot those ideas. So one of the things that I highly suggest is, if you don't have a Pinterest, or if you have one or if you haven't been using it, get on Pinterest, make a mood board, and that way start having those ideas coming and going in your head for when you actually want to take photos of yourself. Another thing I like to keep in mind when I go out to take photos is the time of day. We've all kind of heard about golden hour and kind of not to take photos at noon when the sun is right over our face. I generally like to avoid doing this because it's kind of hard to get feedback when you don't have anybody to look at your photos for you, or you don't have a photographer. So if you're taking them yourself and you're taking your time to do this, you want to make sure that you get your shots that day instead of having to go back and look like, oh, I should have done it differently. And I say that because when it's sunny, you're squinting, there's shadows everywhere, and if you take photos in like a more clouded area or away from the sun, they could be kind of backlit. They might give you the mood that you want. But if it's not high noon, if it's not sunny right in your face, you're not going to be squinting so much, making these kind of like, so when you're doing things off the bat, that's something I like to try to keep in mind, because you only have so much time to go do things. It's not like I have a photographer like, hey, you squinted in this, or hey, you blinked. So if you know it's going to be extremely sunny on a day, what I like to do is not go during the brightest time of the day, which is usually around noon when the sun is so high. So that way, when you take all your photos and you look and you see how you are when you're looking through them, you won't be squinty as much because you're not having the bright sun directly in your face. So that's another example of something I like to keep in mind. Another thing that I like to do is location scout before I take photos if I'm going outside. This is a little bit more time consuming when it comes to doing self-portraits, but it's something that I truly believe helps with my time management. So that way, like say if I wanted to go out and take photos, instead of me driving around trying to figure out where to take photos, and then I change, and then I plug up my camera, and then I do all this stuff, by then, like a lot of time has passed. So usually I will like to have an idea in mind first. I'll either go location scout, or I'll go on the internet and check out like the best places for photos in the city I'm in, or just drive around and see. And that way, when you are ready to take photos, you don't have to worry about where you're going to take photos. You could just drive to the spot. Sometimes I drive to the spot already wearing my Superman suit or the cosplay that I'm going to do. And that way, when I get there, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not wasting my time looking around trying to find everything. I'll know what time of day it is I'm going. And it just makes everything more streamlined. It gives me more peace of mind because I'm not trying to worry about a million different things. Instead, I know where I'm at, and now all I have to focus on is taking the photo. So highly, highly recommend, if you have time, to do a little bit of internet research around your surroundings. Another thing to do is like go on the Instagram or check out, like say I'm in Chicago right now. I would check out Chicago photographers and look through all the different photos and see if they have locations marked in their photographs. That way I'll know for sure where to go instead of spending time driving around trying to figure out stuff. Really helps with the ease of mind when you go to set up to take your photos. Another thing that I like, and this kind of just helps me stay creative, is, like I said before, it is very, very easy to just grab your camera or your phone and set it chest height how we normally would do and take the photo from level height. One of the things that helps me push me to my creativity or to do different things is to try to put my camera in different angles as much as I can. I'll lower the tripod, all these different heights, further away, farther away, using that interval timer so that way I could set it up somewhere and go to a spot. All this does is continue to keep my creativity turning and burning, so that way I'm not taking the same shot that I would all the time. It helps me to sharpen my mind, sharpen my creativity, to do different things and to try different angles, try different vantage points, try different viewpoints. So if you have time and you want your photos to stand out a little bit more than somebody else, try different angles, see how things would work. Have your camera lower on the ground, have it higher on the ground. But before you start taking photos and you set up your tripod on your camera or your camera on your tripod and it's chest height, I just want you to think, you're gonna take that photo, maybe change a different angle just to see what could come out of it. Now folks, thanks for tuning in to this panel. If you have any questions, I am always on Twitter. You can tweet me at Jonathan Belle. If you have any more questions or in-depth questions, I'm always in my DMs answering questions, or you can email me. I have been taking photos of myself for the past 11 years, I want to say. So there are a lot of different things that I know over the years that have helped me take photos of myself. So if this is something that you are just starting out on, or if you are a photographer and you want a little bit of advice or want to run stuff by me, see if I have any ideas to work on or collaborate, I love talking to people about creativity and photography. So thank you for watching.